Is Eeli Tolvanen the biggest one that got away in Nashville Predators history? His breakthrough season got us thinking about some other former Preds that we regret seeing leave town unceremoniously. We'll talk about some of our favorite ones that we wish were still here today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And a special hi to all of you loyal Locked On Preds fans who join us every single day on this podcast. We're happy to be coming to you live again. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at InsideThePreds.com.
We got report cards to get to today as well. Cal Foote, a.k.a. the guy that you probably forgot played the second half of the season for the Nashville Predators, came over from the Lightning in that Tanner Jeannot trade. How was his very short season in Nashville, and what do we think about his role on this team moving forward? We'll get into that coming up later in the show. But first, put out an article today on Penalty Box Radio about the Preds that got away. This is in honor of seeing Eeli Tolvanen have himself quite the season in Seattle. 8 points in 14 playoff games this year. Set all kinds of career highs after finally getting a long leash to do something. So I came up with some other Nashville Predators players who have done big things after leaving town. Told Ann about it, and that got us into a little bit debate about who is the biggest quote-unquote one that got away in team history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I want to preface all of this conversation by saying so much is about fit. And I know the Eeli Tolvanen thing, this Eeli Tolvanen thing is going to stick in the craw of Nashville Predators fans for years to come. Like, this is going to be like the one that's hard to get over. You know, it was a bad breakup, and there's lots of regret and wish we could have done things differently. But I just do want to say, even as I looked through these and we had conversation about it, so much is about fit. So, you know, could these players have replicated what they did eventually here in Nashville, or why didn't they? Whole conversation around this. But I do think it's interesting to look at the ones that got away. Like, what is the regret we're living with, and is it valid?
So let's start with Eeli Tolvanen. And, you know, we've talked about him leaving. We've talked about the backlash we've had. We've talked about fit. This isn't, as we won't go through this list, this isn't the first time a situation like his has happened in Nashville. But why do you think this particular one is the one that has fans maybe the most riled up as it happens?
I think it's timing. I really do. I think that it's timing, because the focus of the Predators when all of this went down with Eeli Tolvanen was, we're going to make a deep playoff push. You know, it wasn't, we're in a reset rebuild. It's, we're going to make a deep playoff push. And so I think expectations were set a certain way for the fan base, and to the fan base, Eeli Tolvanen was going to get them closer to that. True or not, I don't know. But I think timing is everything, because I think frustration levels with where the Predators were, how they've performed since that Stanley Cup final, continuing to kind of keep the core together and trying to add little pieces season after season since then. I think the frustration level was high among the fan base that, like, we need a bigger pivot. We need a bigger pivot. And I think a lot of people felt like it was time earlier for a reset rebuild, and that Eeli Tolvanen was going to be a part of that. I also think there's just a lot of lore around Eeli Tolvanen. I think the expectations from the moment they drafted him were so high, you know, and I think all of that played into why this is such a lightning rod move with the Nashville Predators fan base, and will be, I think, for seasons to come.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off something you said, because you thought it was timing in the expectation of, we need to win now. We need to win now. I think the thing with that is that was the Nashville Predators expectation. Whereas if you ask a lot of the fan base, the expectation wasn't that. The expectation is, okay, we're kind of in a rut. We need to get some of these younger players up to speed.
Yes.
So it's twofold. The Preds had guys in the lineup that weren't Eeli Tolvanen, that weren't necessarily helping the team get wins. Meanwhile, you had Eeli Tolvanen, a guy that you want to kind of be the centerpiece of your team moving forward, on the bench doing nothing while also the team is not winning.
Yes.
So I think that contributed to the hot button issue as well. It's funny because I put this up on Facebook, and the number one comment we got was, this is just an indication of all these, players are indication of, it's time for Hines to go. Eeli Tolvanen is the only person on my list that played under John Hines.
Yes.
Yeah. But isn't that just, and that got me thinking, like, isn't that just also the perception of the team? Like, we're going to waste all these young players, like, oh, these players on the bench, they're not playing the youth. Like, isn't that just kind of in part of the backlash for Tolvanen also comes from just the perception that the Predators can't build these young forwards?
Yes, I think it's 100% perception, because you're right. As I went through and looked at some of the ones that were big for me, they weren't under John Hines.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the backlash against John Hines is residual frustration that maybe isn't even necessarily about coaching decisions as it is about direction of the team. And like you said, when did that pivot need to happen? When did that need to happen for the fan base? And I think that's where a lot of this frustration comes. And look, I've got big feelings about the Eeli Tolvanen situation. And you and I have talked about this because, when you hear hoofbeats, you think horses and not zebras. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I wonder if this is a zebra situation where there's a little bit more to it behind the scenes. I think the way that things have played out has been a really good narrative for Eeli Tolvanen, but I'm not 100% sure that the narrative is maybe completely representative of how all of this went down.
No, but whose
speculation on my part, but I got big feels about it.
Yeah, but I also think there's, to your point, maybe some fault all around that certain people are trying to distance themselves from. I think maybe like the Nashville Predators would maybe like to downplay the role that they had in Eeli Tolvanen not exactly working out.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it was a cluster, shall we say?
Yeah. So let's look at some of these other players and say maybe if their situations in retrospect are worse or better than the Eeli Tolvanen situation. Like, in terms of this really sticks in our craw. We'll get to some of these names in just a second. Some of them you're gonna know who we're gonna be talking about instantly. Some you might have forgot even played for the Nashville Predators.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun show. We're going to get into that in just a second. But first, I want to mention today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. Well, it's the exact same thing when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. All you have to do is add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check next to each part to know whether it will fit. And if it doesn't, you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million different parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only and exclusions apply. All right, Ann, let's go through some of these other names, like ones that got away and whether it's worse or better than the Eeli Tolvanen situation, like their exit in retrospect being worse or better. Let's talk about another forward I think the Preds would like to have right now, and that's Kevin Fiala.
Yes, come on.
A greater than a point per game player for 2 consecutive seasons now.
Yeah.
Is this better or worse than the Eeli Tolvanen situation?
Okay, for me, context makes it slightly better, only because in my mind, I try to find ways to excuse it. And I agree with you. You watch Kevin Fiala and you look at his numbers from when he left Nashville. You know, he left in 2018, 2019 in Nashville. He had 32 points. When he was in Minnesota in 19 and 20, he played same number of games, had 54 points. This season in LA, he played 69 games, 72 points. Y'all, it just keeps getting exponentially worse.
Yeah, and 85-point season last year in 2 games.
I mean, this is somebody who the Predators fans have had to watch flourish where he's been. This is how I try to make myself feel better about this with Kevin Fiala. And I really know, just full disclosure, I'm making excuses. Okay, yeah. This is painful. But in my mind, I think, you know what, the further out from his injury Kevin Fiala got, the more likely he was to perform better. This is the thing that I tell myself. Yeah. Is it accurate? Probably not. I think the opportunities that he was given in Minnesota, I think the team that he is playing with in LA, taking better advantage of what he can do. And that is what sticks in the craw. When we talk about these situations, it's like, you know, the situation is better. Why couldn't that situation be good here? So, but I will say for me, I make the excuse that, you know what, the further out he got from that injury he suffered in the Stanley Cup Finals, the more likely he was to thrive wherever he was.
Right. And I think the thing also with Fiala is in terms of the player you wish you had back, that's probably, you know, that's worse than the Tolvanen situation because I think Fiala's a better player than Eeli Tolvanen.
Agreed.
Or at least has been one to this point of his career. I think the only thing that maybe makes it a little bit better than the Tolvanen situation is the situation surrounding the Granlund trade. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, in retrospect, it was a bad move, but you knew what they were going for. You know, getting, you needed to win now. You didn't have time to develop Fiala, so you wanted to bring Granlund in, who's, you know, more of a good right now. It's just something that it didn't work. It didn't work. So for me, I think it's better than the Tolvanen situation, just because it's one of those like, okay, you didn't lose him for free and you kind of saw what the team was going for. Yeah. It just wound up maybe being a regretful trade.
Yeah.
And speaking of regretful trade, Anne, here's another recent addition to that list. How about Sammy Girard?
Yes, come on.
Yeah, this was a guy who, of course, made his Nashville Predators debut in the season opener in 2017-2018 season. Made it out of camp just 1 year after being drafted, 3 points in 5 games with the Nashville Predators, and then was off to Colorado in the ill-fated Kyle Turris trade, which, by the way, also sent Matt Duchene to Ottawa. So there's a little bonus Predators connection for you.
Yeah.
And to me, this is one that's, I think, maybe interesting because not only is that maybe up there in terms of the worst trade in Predators history, certainly one of 2, I think, in my book. But also the fact that the Predators defensively kind of suck this past season. And you have a guy in Colorado who, behind 2 very Norris-worthy defenders, was also getting some Norris buzz as like early as last year.
Yeah. Yep. This one is a tough one. And it's one that people don't necessarily think about right off the top of their head. When we talk about this, you think Kevin Fiala right away. He's kind of the pinpoint narrative. But it is players like Sammy Girard. And another one, kind of in that same vein for me, is Freddy Gaudreau.
I mean, I'm not comparing Freddy Gaudreau to Kevin Fiala, but
no, but as far as did we really want to let that go? Look, Freddy Gaudreau, great story, undrafted guy. Milwaukee signed him, he was called up first during the food poisoning game against Detroit, which who doesn't want to make their debut then, but then came up, played in the Stanley Cup finals after we lost Fisher and Rijo, and had his first 3 NHL goals were in Stanley Cup finals. So look at you, big guy.
Yeah.
Then, free agency, went to Pittsburgh, and then now in Minnesota. And he's doing some things in Minnesota. And here is where it's not even so much the stats for me on Freddy Gaudreau as it is the salt in the wound of Freddy Gaudreau. Because on April 13th, when the Predators played Minnesota, Freddy Gaudreau scored 2 goals. And during intermission, they announced, hey, we're going to sign him to a 5-year, $10 million deal. Salt in the wound on Freddy Gaudreau.
You know what else? Freddy Gaudreau had 38 points this year. Would have made him the 5th highest scorer on the Nashville Predators this season.
Let's go. Yeah.
The only Preds players that had more than him were Yossi, Duchesne, Novak, and Forsberg.
Yeah, so, he would have been, second leading goal scorer behind Duchesne, tied with Forsberg. Yeah. Woof and ouch.
That sucks, man.
It does suck.
Yeah.
It does.
You know what? And here's another name that I kind of want to go back to that I was going through this list that kind of reminds me of the same vibe as Freddy Gaudreau a little bit. Rich Peverley. This is a throwback name.
I was going to say, we are reaching in the vault.
Yeah. Now, if this guy was almost kind of the Tanner Jeannot of his era. Freddy, he was undrafted, played in the ECHL. His play in the ECHL earned him a contract with the Milwaukee Admirals. He wound up being the Milwaukee Admirals' leading scorer. And because of that, the Preds saw him and just decided to sign him from Milwaukee. He got into some games, did really well, kind of a depth guy, but just never earned a full-time spot in the lineup and was put on waivers in 2009. He was claimed by Atlanta, which there's another Atlanta player connection that we're going to get to in a little bit, and wound up scoring 35 points in the last 38 games of the season, had a 55-point season the next year. And then I think he moved on to Boston, which was, I think, the thing that people really remember him from. He won that Stanley Cup in 2011, was one of the grit guys on that team, still to this day, a beloved member of the Boston Bruins community. And it's just another one of those things. It's the Nashville Predators, different situation, maybe a little bit longer a leash. Maybe he's the X factor for, a Predators deep cup run team in 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same vibe as Gaudreau a little bit. Not by far, not a high end scorer kind of guy. But man, if you would have held on to them, that would have been just a perfect addition to that middle six.
Yeah. So much regret, so little time.
Yeah. Some other names. We'll get through just a couple other names I want to throw out there. Andrew Burnett, who a lot of people know now for his coaching situation. There's a lot of Preds fans that want him back. Played on the team the inaugural season, did fine, was traded to Atlanta for a draft pick, had 2 50-point seasons, wound up playing over 1,000 games in the NHL, had about 800 career points. I think the Predators would have liked him back. Another one I wanted to mention, Ann, is Greg DeVries. That Greg DeVries, the one that played on the team in 2007 and 2008. He was also on the very first Nashville Predators team, traded after 5 games, became a top 4 defenseman on the Colorado Avalanche team that won a cup in 2001. And then do you remember Devin Dubnyk as a Nashville Predator?
Wow.
It's okay if you don't. A lot of people forgot. Came here from Edmonton after UC Saros, or not UC Saros, man. After Pekka Rinne. It's been so long since Rinne has been here that I've had like the UC Saros franchise goaltender just ingrained in my head. But it was when Pekka Rinne got that hip surgery. The Preds made a trade with the Oilers to bring Devin Dubnyk in. And after 2 games and 9 goals allowed, the Preds were like, yeah, let's not do that anymore. And then was put on waivers, traded to Montreal, bounced around. And then that's when he wound up in Minnesota and became the Devin Dubnyk that terrorized Preds fans for a better part of the last decade.
Oh my gosh. I'm telling you, the word waivers is really becoming a twitchy word for me. It really is. Like, golly, we gotta do something about this, because this is turning into a really depressing episode.
Yeah. Hey, you know what will cheer us up, Ann? Talking about Cal Foote's play this season.
Yeah, we're gonna do that in just a minute. We're gonna give him his report card and talk through Cal Foote's season. But first, I want to let you know we're welcoming a new sponsor to the Locked On NHL network. It is Bird Dogs. Look, if you or a guy in your life is desperately needing to refresh your summer wardrobe, you need to check out Bird Dogs. They sent us a couple pair of shorts to try out, and to really put them to the test, I gave them to my very pickiest child to give them an honest evaluation. Look, here's what's real. My son hates uncomfortable clothes. We've both ended up in tears clothes shopping before when he was younger, but I figured if he likes them, that means something. I want him to look nice and he wants to be comfortable, and Bird Dogs hit the nail on the head. You get the comfort and stretch that guys want with a classic look and fit that makes everybody look put together. Look, they're great for any sort of summer plans you have. You can wear them out on the boat with your friends and then head on over to a nice restaurant for dinner later that night, never having to change your clothes. And you're going to be comfortable the whole time. So if you're looking for comfort, fit, and versatility, you need to check out our friends at Bird Dogs. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL. And when you enter promo code LockedOnNHL, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. Again, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a great selection of comfortable, stylish, versatile pants for the guy in your life.
All right, and we're continuing our off-season report cards today with Cal Foote. This was a guy, a defender that came over in the Tanner Jeannot trade from the Tampa Bay Lightning, played the last 24 games with the Preds, 1 goal, 3 assists, and 4 points. Big contributor on the penalty kill. Yeah, that's pretty much all you can say about Cal Foote at this point. And what's one word to describe Cal Foote's season?
One word to describe Cal Foote's season is and you are. And I don't mean that in an unkind way, because part of the Cal Foote narrative in which he is overlooked is that he came over in the trade with the Tanner Jeannot. And when you talk about that Tanner Jeannot trade, what you really the main storyline of that trade is, of course, all of the draft picks. I mean, that was a ginormous haul from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I think Cal Foote tends to be overlooked in how he got here and then also in his play. I agree with you. I think on the penalty kill, really helpful. Not somebody who necessarily stood out. This is a third pairing defenseman. What's your one word to describe Cal Foote?
You ran out of words to say Cal Foote, didn't you?
I think it's interesting that his name is Callan Foote. Just a little bit of trivia, folks. He's not Cal, he's Calvin. Callan.
Man, that's not a nutshell of Cal Foote's season right there. To me, my one word is Tom Smakowski from the movie Office Space. He was the guy that had the jump to conclusions little game board. I don't know if you ever saw that movie Office Space, but the famous line that's been used a lot. He was the guy that did the evaluation, did his job evaluation, and he had like the one job where he had to really bend over backwards to try to describe. And one of the evaluators just finally leaned up to him and said, What would you say you do here?
Oh gosh.
That to me is, I think, what the offseason should be. People in the offseason should be saying to Cal Foote.
Yeah.
Because yeah, what exactly is he doing here?
Yeah.
He's to put it nicely, not really an impressive 24 game stint with the Nashville Predators
Yeah.
to me, and he looked more like a guy that you come in if somebody else in your top 6 defensive core is hurt
Mhm.
or needs a day off. He looks more like a rotational defenseman guy, not somebody that I think is going to be a building block for your team, which I think the Predators maybe had sort of a hope, a fingers crossed sort of
Yeah.
hope that maybe they could build him into something, but there's just a lot of work that needs to be done to get Cal Foote to being a reliable everyday NHL defenseman. And he's 24 years old. I don't know how much more room he's got left to grow.
Yeah. What do you see, just talking about Cal Foote and where is he going to fit in with the Nashville Predators? How do you see this defensive core playing out? Yossi, Carrier, Fabro, Tyson Berry. Who am I forgetting? Jeremy
There,
Lazan.
yeah, I mean, there's probably Dante Fabro.
Oh, did I forget Fabro?
Yeah. Did you say
Hashtag
Fabro
sorry.
or Carrier? I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll rewind this later and go
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
It's interesting question, Ann, because also you got to mention who else is going to be on this team next year. Are the Preds
Yeah.
going to try to go get a defenseman, or are they going to maybe move a defenseman? Is Ryan McDonough going to waive his no move clause or something like that? There was rumors that the Preds maybe were kind of kicking around the idea of asking him to do that at the deadline. Didn't because of all the trades that happened since, but the Predators, we kind of mentioned it while we were talking about Sammy Girard, one of the worst defensive teams in the NHL this year, second to last in terms of shots allowed.
Yeah.
So that is something that is absolutely going to need to change. And you're going to need guys on the blue line that are a little bit better at puck possession, a
Mhm.
little bit faster, a little bit, more apt at keeping up with some of the big guns. Guys like Cal Foote have, they have the size and they're good for, shot blocking, clearing out the front of the net, some of the physical stuff that goes along with that role. But if you really want to revamp this team, do you look at somebody like Cal Foote and say, okay, that's the type of defenseman we need that's going to be, out there, 18 minutes a game on that bottom pair and really give us a good shot at holding some teams,
Yeah.
neutralizing some teams' offense? Or is he a guy that you look at and say, okay, when he's in the lineup, the expectation is just don't screw too
Move
much
up.
up?
Yeah.
Like, is he just kind of a plug and play when, you need a defenseman to go out there and play minutes?
Yeah. And I think we talk so much as we look ahead, especially with this reset and what we saw at the end of the season. We focus so much on, the forwards and how are these guys going to step in? What is it going to look like for Tommy Novak and Luke Evangelista? And will we see Joachim Kamel? But I think, wow, there is a lot to talk about when it comes to the defense too. So Nashville Predators have a lot going on this offseason. And here's the thing, I have no idea what Barry Trotz is going to do. I think it's going to be very interesting at the trade deadline to see what they do with all of their draft capital. Are they going to make a move? Are they going to sit tight for a season? There's a lot of options, but there's also a lot of areas where the Nashville Predators kind of need to take a hard look. And like we said, defense is definitely one of them too.
Yeah, and Foote is a restricted free agent. Should mention that. So the Predators could maybe give him like one
Yeah.
year. If it works out, great. If not, back to Milwaukee you go. Or they can just say, you know what, we didn't really like what we saw. We're not going to extend you. We're not going to offer you a qualifying offer. And maybe you turn your attention to somebody in Milwaukee like Spencer Stastny, who had a very strong debut.
Yeah.
Maybe this is an opening for Jeremy Lazan to kind of take that next step.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I think if I were in charge of the Nashville Predators, I would say maybe there are better options, to round out the defense than Cal Foote. And again, I don't mean it to slam the guy or anything like that.
No.
I just think as you're building this team moving forward, you're going to need a defenseman with a little bit different of a skill set.
Yeah. And it's about investing forward, like you said, investing forward. So I think you're going to err on the side of investing in somebody like a Spencer Stastny.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. We'll see. Lord only knows, y'all. This offseason for the Nashville Predators is going to be absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah. And speaking of, back on the trade deadline, we pitched the idea of having you guys at home create your own trade proposals, a trade proposal that you guys wanted to see. We would judge on the show. We never actually got to do that on the show because the day we were going to do it was the weekend where David Poile announced he was stepping down, that Nino Niederreiter got traded. Later that day, Matthias Ekholm got traded. Tanner Jeannot got traded the day after that. Long story short, we never actually got to do that segment. Now that it's the offseason, we're bringing it back. So if you guys have some trade proposals, stuff that you would love to see happen in this offseason, maybe the Predators take a big swing at a big guy on the block later this year. Maybe you want to get somebody off the roster. Maybe you think you can bring some intriguing prospects back. Whatever it is, we want to hear. So send us your trade proposals. You can either tweet us at LO_Predators or comment on one of our YouTube videos. Let us know. Coming up later, we will be doing that live on air. We're excited to do that. And where can the people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at penaltyboxradio.com. Follow me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Predators is your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. All you have to do is search Locked On Predators on whatever platform you use and hit that subscribe button. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter at LO_Predators to stay in the loop and chat with us during the off season. We will see you tomorrow for another all-new episode.